Let's talk about a band you've almost definitely heard, even if you've never actually heard of them. Seriously, they're kind of the ultimate influencers, a group whose DNA it's baked into almost 50 years of rock music. This is the story of Gang of Four.
And to really get a handle on this, let's start with a little puzzle. What could these bands, these absolute legends, possibly have in common? I mean, think about it. You've got the iconic college rock of R.E.M, right? Then there's the funk-punk chaos of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the grunge explosion that was Nirvana, and then the super sharp, dancey post-punk revival from bands like Franz Ferdinand and Bloc Party. On the surface, they're from completely different planets.
Well, the answer, the thing that connects every single one of them, is that they all owe a massive, massive artistic debt to just one band. They were all profoundly, directly influenced by Gang of Four.
And that's what makes their story so wild. Gang of Four is the quintessential band's band, you know? The artists that we all love while they loved Gang of Four. So, come on, let's peel back the layers and figure out what made them so revolutionary.
So what was it? What was it about their sound that just changed everything? Well, it was like nothing else that was happening at the time. It was a complete teardown of what a rock band was even supposed to sound like.
Back in the late 1970s, right as punk was kind of starting to burn out, Gang of Four crawls out of Leeds, England with something totally new. It was sharp, it was aggressive, but it was also funky. Like, you could dance to it. You know, I think INXS frontman Michael Hutchence said it best. He said it was art meets the devil via James Brown. And honestly, is there a better description? Their music was smart, a little bit dangerous, and man, it was always, always rhythmic.
The genre they helped create? We call it post-punk. What they did was they took that raw, frantic energy of punk, but they stripped it way down. They focused on these heavy, driving bass lines and almost tribal-sounding drums. But the real magic, the secret sauce, was in the interplay. The bass carried the tune, while Andy Gill's guitar, it wasn't playing chords. It was like a weapon, just slashing and scraping and leaving these huge, gaping holes of silence. It was music that was just full of tension and space.
And this is where you can really hear how experimental they were. Take their song, Love Like Anthrax. They did something nobody had ever done before. So in one of your speakers, you've got the singer, John King, just wailing about how love is basically a disease. But then in the other speaker, you've got the guitarist, Andy Gill, delivering this dry, almost academic monologue about how silly love songs are. The two parts are literally fighting for your attention, forcing you to listen in a completely different way.
But look, that radical sound, it wasn't just them being weird for the sake of being weird. Gang of Four had something to say. Their music was a vehicle for a really sharp critique of modern life, and that created this amazing combination of brainy politics and rhythms that made you want to move.
Yeah, they weren't singing about cars and girls. They were singing about consumerism, war, feeling alienated from everyone, the weirdness of work and vacation. This was not your typical top 40 material, and it definitely got them into some trouble.
And their commitment to that message meant they absolutely, positively refused to compromise. So get this, in 1979, they get invited onto the biggest music show in the UK, Top of the Pops. The producers tell them they have to change a single word in a lyric. The band just said no, walked right off the set, and the BBC banned the song. Then, a few years later, it happens again. Their song, I Love a Man in a Uniform, gets banned because it was considered inappropriate during the Falklands War. But that rebellious streak, those incredibly sharp lyrics, it earned them some serious praise. David Frick from Rolling Stone called them probably the best politically motivated band in rock and roll. For them, the politics and the art were just one and the same.
Now, a career that lasts almost 50 years for a band this intense, it's bound to get a little complicated. And believe me, Gang of Four's story is one of constant and often pretty chaotic change.
I mean, this timeline of their band members really says it all. It's as fragmented as one of their songs. The lineup was always shifting. With guitarist Andy Gill, that's that line running right through the middle, he was often the one and only anchor holding the whole thing together through all the different eras.
And you can really see it here. Two totally different versions of the band, more than a decade apart. On the left, that's the lineup from 2011, and on the right, that's what they look like in 2022. It's kind of amazing, and a real testament to the power of the music itself, that it can live on through so many different people.
So here's the journey in a nutshell.
They get together in '76, drop their game-changing debut album Entertainment just 3 years later, and keep going until the tragic loss of their visionary guitarist Andy Gill in 2020. Today, the current lineup is actually out on what they're calling their Long Goodbye Tour.
Which brings us right back to where we started, their legacy. Why does a band that was often so difficult, so confrontational, and never really had huge commercial hits, why do they still matter so much?
Because the work is just that good. It stands up. Rolling Stone magazine named their debut album Entertainment the 5th greatest punk album of all time. Not post-punk, punk. That's how fundamental, how foundational this album is.
But if you need the ultimate proof, the absolute smoking gun, here it is. This quote comes from Kurt Cobain's personal journals. He just flat out admitted that in its earliest days, Nirvana was just trying to sound like Gang of Four. I mean, when one of the biggest rock stars in history says that, you know the influence is real.
And that influence didn't stop with grunge, not by a long shot. In the early 2000s, this whole new wave of bands, Franz Ferdinand, Block Party, The Rapture, they brought that sharp, dancey, guitar-driven sound roaring back, introducing Gang of Four's ideas to a whole new generation.
So I'll leave you with this thought. More than 40 years ago, Gang of Four was already writing these incredible songs questioning media, consumerism, and politics. In our world today, a world that is just saturated with information and conflict, well, maybe that kind of music that makes you think just as much as it makes you move, maybe it matters more than it ever has.